Hey guys, this is Nathan and welcome to the Gaming 4. Today in this Unturned map review, we're going to be covering a map called Isle of Wolves 3. Now this map only got a 74 out of 100, even though on the workshop it's got 5 out of 5 stars and tons of people have seen it. So today we're going to be going over why it did so well and then some of the reasons why it maybe shouldn't have scored as high as it did on the workshop. So one of the main strengths of this map is the fact that it's a large map, but it has so many locations. There's not any area of the map that's not close to something, and there's just tons of locations in general hidden throughout the map, and not all of them are marked either. Now the nice thing about having this many locations is whenever you're exploring or just wandering around, you're never at a lack of something to do, and there's always somewhere else to explore or to get gear from. Another thing relating to traveling throughout the map is the landscape. Now the landscape in this map was actually very good, and it was very interesting as well. So whenever you would explore from location to location, the landscape was usually changing quite a bit. In addition to that, there's also a good variety of trees and materials used throughout the map as well. So it's just another way to keep the map interesting, keep it fresh, and keep it a lot less boring since it is a large map and you do have to travel from place to place. In terms of the survival side of this map, there was a decent amount of food and water for survivors to live off of. There was also a decent amount of clothing for players to find as well. But it would have been nice to see a little bit more food and water and clothing, but that sort of contributes to a larger issue of the map, so we're not going to get into that quite yet. Besides normal food and water, there was also the addition of a lot of natural resources such as berries, and then of course metal nodes, trees, etc. One thing to mention about the berries, whereas they are good to survive, they're a little bit overpowered in terms of the extra utility that comes along with them, including the healing and the anti-infection gear. All it really takes is for you to cultivate 1 or 2 types of berries, and that's all the food you need for the rest of the game forever. So as a map maker, you always want to be cautious about what type of berries you place where, and definitely read up on what each type of berry does before you place it down in your map. For example, you'd probably want to place the more valuable berries, the ones that give you a decent amount of food and water and healing or anti-radiation. You might want to place those a little bit more rarely than you do the ones that have negative effects or just don't help the player as much. So it's definitely good to see those natural berries in there, as it did help supplement the lack of food and water, but maybe place a little bit less in certain places where there's just a ton of them. In terms of the detailing of this map, whereas it was not great, and we'll mention that a little bit later, there was a lot of good uses of unique sort of item combos and just creative locations throughout the entire map. So there's a lot of good thought and creativity that went into the design and the detailing of this map in certain locations. So very good job there. There's definitely some things that I saw on this map that I've never seen before in any other map. So very good job there. Lastly, in terms of the difficulty of this map, there's actually quite a bit to work towards. There's quite a few military bases with various amounts of military gear and whatnot. There's also quite a few radiation zones that you would be able to explore as a survivor as well. So definitely a lot to work towards. There's definitely a high capped end game, and there's an inclusion of mega zombies, which are actually probably the best we've seen in a while. The mega zombies specifically in this map were not very tanky, but they actually dropped decent gear as well. So definitely a very good job on those mega zombies. I would prefer a weaker mega zombie to one that is way too strong, especially when they don't give very good gear. So good balancing with that. Alright, so that pretty much completes it for the positives of this map. So let's move on to some of the negatives and some of the things that could have been improved a little bit throughout this entire map. One of the main negatives that I found throughout the entire map is that the detailing was very inconsistent. Now, as I mentioned before, there were some areas that the detailing was fantastic and it was used in certain ways that I'd never seen before. But there were also areas that were just not detailed at all. There's entire buildings that were not completed, and there was also areas where you just see copy pasted over an entire military base or throughout an entire town. So it would have been nice if the detailing was a lot more consistent and obviously varying on the higher end more than the lower end. So obviously this map lost a lot of points on that. It's definitely not good to see a lot of areas just not detailed in the first place, as well as just a ton of copy and paste. Another main issue throughout the entire map is that the item spawns were very confusing and kind of inconsistent as well. There's a lot of areas that could have used a lot more item spawns, and there was a lot of areas that had a good amount of item spawns. In addition to that, some of the item spawns just did not make sense. For example, you'd go into a military base in one of the higher tier locations and you'd start finding some military gear or things that are related to military weapons, and then out of the blue you'd find 1 or 2 random ranger weapons. So it just seemed like there needed to be a bit more thought that went into the detailing and how items were spread around throughout the map, as well as some of the balancing that went into the items. Another issue that directly related to the item spawns was the lack of ranged weapons, and I know we've seen this in a lot of other maps. It's definitely one of the harder things to get right when you're making a map, but there is definitely a lack in ranged weapons and a huge lack in terms of ammo. Throughout the entire map, and I searched pretty much every location, I only found one box of low caliber military ammo. Now that doesn't mean that I didn't find some extra clips, and I found one or two here and there, but they really do not hold that much ammo, especially since out of the 30 they usually only contain 4 or 5. So out of the 5 or 6 military bases, I only found one box of ammo, which that definitely shows that there's an issue with the amount of ammo that's in the entire map in the first place. So regardless of how many weapons you find, which there should have been more, probably twice as many, it would have been great to see probably 10 or 20 times more the amount of ammo throughout the entire map. Another smaller issue has to do with the vehicles and the lack of vehicles. So it would have been nice to see a few more vehicles overall throughout the map, as well as some different variety in vehicles, including some water and some air. Now I think there were a few water and air vehicle spawns, but it would have been nice to see a few more of those, especially since there are a decent amount of water areas and definitely plenty of room to fly in the sky. Also, it would have been nice to see a few more vehicle repair items, such as a wrench, maybe a gas can or a blowtorch. Just things like that would have been really nice to see as well, because once I did find a vehicle, it took me freaking forever to build a jerry can to even get gas into it. So maybe add a few more of those types of spawns throughout the map. Lastly, I overall had an issue finding some anti-radiation gear for actually exploring the dead zones properly. Of course, whenever you add dead zones, you should have some sort of radiation gear, whether it's a full biohazard suit or a gas mask and filters. So definitely consider adding a few more of those spawns, maybe in your local fire stations, military bases, wherever it would make sense to have those. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the main critiques and the strengths of this map. Obviously it did very well in the workshop, so you guys should probably consider checking it out, and of course there will be a link to that in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe if you want to see some more. I will see you all later.